G'day! Welcome to True Blue History. I'm Adam Blum. Today's special guest is Lambis Englezos, and Lambis is famous for the work he did with the missing of Fromelles. And he has joined us today to tell us about the amazing work that he did in finding the missing of Fromelles as we approach the 105th anniversary of the battle on the 19th and 20th of July this year. Hi, Lambis. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Hey, hello, Adam.
Thanks, Lambis. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And so what I wanted to do, Lambis, was get you on to talk about what prompted your interest in military history in particular, and what was it about Fromelles that drew you to undertaking this enormous project?
I've had a long interest in history and military history, and I consider myself very fortunate to have shared the company and the companionship of our World War I veterans, and in the case of the Battle of Fromelles, to the 19th of July men, the survivors of the Battle of Fromelles.
For the listeners who aren't aware, Lambis, and familiar with Fromelles, when was the battle and why is it significant to Australia?
Fromelles itself is up in the north of France, and it was the very first time up near Lille, the German sector, towards the Belgian border. It was sort of a quiet sector, but the Battle of Fromelles was the very first time Australian soldiers went into battle on the Western Front. It was designed as a feint to try and fool the Germans into thinking that a major attack was going to happen there, so the German troops would stay in place and not go down to the Somme, where the major battle had already begun, and where the Australians would attack at Pozières on the 23rd of July. So it was planned as a feint, but it was hasty and there were disastrous consequences. Had we not attacked, if indeed that was the plan, it would have been a complete success because the Germans would have waited and waited for something to happen. But at 6 p.m. on the evening of the 19th of July, we go in and to the disastrous result that we had.
So what sparked your interest, and what was it for you that seemed to miss with Fromelles and the missing of Fromelles? What was it that sparked your interest?
Through the Friends of the 15th Brigade and my good friend Robin Caulfield, all of this Fromelles momentum is due to author, historian, founder of the Friends of the 15th Brigade and friend Robin Caulfield. He wrote the initial book, Don't Forget Me, Cobra, in the year 2000. And it was that momentum from there because he did some research and profiled a soldier called Jack Bowden, and it was his file that led us to Pheasant Wood. But through the work that we did together, we would go and visit veterans, and the more I learnt about the Battle of Fromelles itself, the more I was interested to follow up with that association through the Friends of the 15th Brigade, and the question of the missing eventually arose through Robin Caulfield's research.
So that research and that book you talk about, Lambis, through Robin Caulfield's book, Don't Forget Me Cobber, you looked at the Red Cross missing files. Can you tell us a little bit about that for the listeners who aren't aware what they are?
The Red Cross Wounded and Missing files were digitised, and it's a resource that you can access. And in the case of the Battle of Fromelles, what we did, I went through the honour roll in Robin's book at the back, looking for those who were missing, and because it was all prompted by Jack Bowden's file, because he's the only one in all 1,332 that mentioned a place called Pheasant Wood. I'd never heard of Pheasant Wood. None of us knew where or what it was. But I went over after having read Robin's book in 2000 and went to Fromelles, and in 2002 with that specific question. I went over in 1996 for the anniversary of the Battle of Fromelles to be there and walk the ground. But in 2002, I went there with the question, where is Pheasant Wood? Where are the missing, the unaccounted for missing of the Battle of Fromelles?
When you did go to Fromelles and you did find Pheasant Wood in 2002, then what questions did you have and what started the process for finding the missing of Fromelles?
Well, on the 19th of July 2002, I walked the length of no man's land with our very good friend Marcel Delabar, and I asked him, where is Pheasant Wood? And he said, we don't know, maybe somewhere up there, pointing towards the village. So we came back while I was there in 2002, I met Ward Selby and Joe Selby at VC Corner Cemetery. His grandfather survived the Battle of Fromelles. He was a 19th of July man. And when we got back, we commenced the research and tried to find out more and more about the Battle of Fromelles. And the main thrust in the research came in the Red Cross. We ended up missing files. And we ended up getting a working list of German documents, because what the Germans did when they gathered the bodies, took the ID discs off the bodies if they had them, and recorded their names, and through the Red Cross they sent them back to Australia, which is a remarkable thing to do in itself. But what it did in the end, it gave us the names of the soldiers that they had buried. In the case of Jack Bowden, where they'd buried him, the only one. So it is absolute serendipity and chance that led us to Pheasant Wood. What we needed was aerial photography to try and find where this Pheasant Wood was. Canberra said they didn't have any, so we sent away to England, to the Imperial War Museum, looking for aerial photographs of the ground behind the German line. And eventually a series of images began to emerge for us of a wood. And we had photos 10 days before the battle, and the ground there was not touched. Then a week after the battle, clear evidence of sustained earthwork. So we put forward the proposition that having seen that photograph of bodies on a train being taken back somewhere behind the line for burial, that somewhere behind the German line there should be a burial site of the unaccounted for missing. Those who got into and beyond the German line were killed and buried by the Germans.
So the Germans they weren't trying to hide that they dug these pits, had they? It was clear as day that there was something there, and wasn't a gun emplacement. There was something there.
What the series of images showed was that this particular wood provided them with a line of sight cover provided by the wood, the proximity of the light rail, because what the Germans did after the battle, they cleared their lines, separated by nationality, German from British, from Australian, and they put them on a train. They dug for aerial images, clearly showed 8 pits, 5 of them backfilled, and 3 left open for the duration of the war. So this was our proposition, given the documentation, the German documents, the aerial photographs. We put forward the proposition that this was a likely burial site. Author historian from Sydney, Jonathan King, he broke the article, the story on the front page of the Australian in July the 18th, 2003. He pressed me for a figure. How many missing are there? I said, I don't know. We're in the early stages of research, which is ongoing. He insisted on a figure, and I offered him the figure of 250. So he wrote it on the front page that 250 soldiers buried before Pheasant Wood. So we had to apply political and press pressure, because they said, go away, you amateur schmucks. You do not know what you are talking about. So there was a fair bit of rattling at the doors of the gatekeepers of history, a fair bit of tilting at windmills. But having said that, I'm no Don Quixote. I'm more Sancho Panza than Don Quixote, I think.
So this was happening in 2003, and then in 2005 you present your case to Canberra. And what happened there? What happened with your findings to present to Canberra?
Well, questions were being asked. There were articles in the press, and eventually we were invited to Canberra to make our case to an expert panel. And Ward Selby, John Fielding and I presented to that expert panel of historians and military and bureaucrats. And we made our case using the aerial photographs, the documentation, the list of names, and opinions varied as to the strength of our case. We went away, they went away to continue the research. A member of the expert panel went to Fromelles, and he walked the ground there, and he wrote a report, the John Williams report, which at best was erroneous, but it nearly sank us. And but we persisted. 60 Minutes did a story on it in July or June of 2006. So it was well and truly on the public agenda. But eventually, on request, some research was done in the archives in Munich, and a German document was found by Dr. Lothar Saup in the archives, and it was the definitive document, no more evasive smoke. It was dated 2 days after the battle, in which it said, you will dig before Pheasant Wood for 400. So there was no more evasive smoke. The ground had been used for burial purposes. Some on the expert panel said that they are gun pits, but I can't see how or why you'd backfill a gun pit. Our case was gaining momentum, and at this point, without going too early, I would like to thank the Australian Army for having established and maintained a process which eventually brought us to investigation and confirmation and ultimately recovery.
So, in your opinion, Lambis, the media can sometimes go against you in a case that you're putting something forward, but in this case, the media was vital in helping you with the case.
Yes, we followed due and official process, but we kept getting knocked back. There was active discouragement from a wide field, but politically and through the press, the momentum was such that we did have that meeting and made our case to the expert panel. And then the search for evidence continued, and eventually that was the document, the Von Braun document, saying dig before Pheasant Wood for 400. The Germans dig 8 pits, they fill in 5. The press helped.
So after you had the smoking gun, the missing piece of the puzzle, what happened next, and when did the first dig of Pheasant Wood happen?
The momentum was such that the Army, they engaged Major General Mike O'Brien to lead a process, and it was decided to go to Pheasant Wood and investigate the ground. No digging. There's a lot of very clever technology, sophisticated metal detectors, ground penetrating radar. They engaged Tony Pollard from Glasgow University, to go there with that very clever technology to investigate the ground. I went over to be there for that investigation, and a lot of clever technology and planning. It was always going to be in my plan 61B, the very clever one, where I go to Le Bunnings in Paris and I get a shovel, a flashlight, a balaclava, and a good French lawyer. However, having followed due and official process, they were finally there to investigate the ground using clever technology. They were there for 3 weeks, and they used that technology to prepare a report to send back to Canberra. They found lots of items, lots of military junk, bullets, shrapnel balls, shell casings and the like. But as well as all that junk, they found 2 distinctly Australian items. One was a heart-shaped medallion with Anzac written on it. The other was a horseshoe medallion from the Shire of Alberton. So the only way they could have got there in the bodies of dead Australians, because no Australian soldier got that far that night or throughout the entire duration of the war. That ground had never, ever been fought over. And the general scatter pattern right across the front of Pheasant Wood suggested that anything buried there was still there, because the ground had not been disturbed. Now, right throughout this process, there have been many, many strange coincidences, many links in the chain. And a member of our team of research and advocacy, Tim Mitford, his great uncle was missing among the missing of the Battle of Fromelles, and he came from Alberton. So this thing is absolutely remarkable. This little medallion comes out of the surface. They're allowed to dig to a shovel's depth only, no more. This comes out of the ground. It belongs to Tim Mitford's great uncle. Absolutely astounding. So given the clever technology, the items that were found, it was decided to re-engage Tony Pollard to go back there in 2008, in May of 2008, to actually dig, to find out whether or not it still was a burial site.
How were the French locals for you guys going over? And can you tell us about the lovely French lady whose land this was on?
We have many friends in Fromelles, and among them is the wonderful Madame Marie-Paul de Massier, the landowner at Pheasant Wood. When she learned about the possibility of her land being a possible burial site, she was sympathetic, and she allowed the work to proceed, the investigation, having lost 2 uncles in the Great War, one of whom was missing. So Madame Marie-Paul de Massier, she allowed that work to proceed. We've had a succession of mayors, the late Francis Delatte, Hubert Huchette, Jean-Gabriel Masson, many, many people who meet and greet. Marcel Delabarre, he has set up local commemorative associations there. Pierre Sellier. We have many friends in France. So they were sympathetic to the proposition. None of them knew where or what it was, but we were eventually there with, having done that clever technology the year before, they were finally there with the diggers to determine 3 things. Was it a burial site? If there were bodies there, what condition with the bodies in, and if possible, to get an idea of the numbers.
So this happens in 2008. They start to dig, and what did they find, Lambis, after they found the badges and everything? Did they continue to then exhume the site for the dead, or what happened?
Those medallions indicated very strongly that it was still a burial site. The technology, what they did during the dig, they removed a metre of topsoil to get down to the original level. Once the press had gone, Tim and I were invited on site to view what they had done. You can see the absolute pencil line straightness of the edges of the pits and the difference in the colour of the clay, suggesting that anything buried there was indeed still there. Very late on the second night of the dig, there were signs of discovery. Paola Totaro, a top journalist, she was there, and she reckoned they've found something. A lot of hushed activity in the corner of the compound, a lot of phone calling taking place, no eye contact as the archaeological team left the site that night. The following morning, we get to the site, to the official announcement that the site was intact. There was some quick relief, but that was overtaken by hope, the hope that these soldiers would be recovered and given the dignity of individual reburial. Over the course of the next few weeks, because they actually dug deeper, and they found the remains, opened all the pits, and found remains in those pits. We'd been banned from the site. We weren't allowed on site. But very late early into the third week, during a lunch break, I was called on site by Roger Lee. Tony Pollard, the archaeologist from Guard, who was having some rest in the tent there, and he jumped up and told them to shut down pit number 5. He didn't think I should see pit number 5, but I was allowed onto the site, as was Tim, sometime later, to view the ground there, and it was very grim, but the remains were, in inverted commas, in good condition. As they had been placed or thrown in, the tight clay of Pheasant Wood had held them in place. They only dug sondages, test pits. They weren't allowed to remove any bodies, but it was clear that the bodies were contiguous in good shape and could be recovered, but they could only make a guesstimate as to the numbers, and they continued their work, and at the end of the process, they filled in those pits to await a political determination as to how they were going to proceed. What were they going to do? Were they going to put a monument up saying believed to be buried here, Australians and British, Australians of the 5th Division, British of the 61st Division killed on the 19th or the 20th of July, or would they go back and recover the site? Had we left them like that, it would send a really bad message to our current serving people. So we had to make that recovery. They couldn't be a financial or logistical inconvenience. When we got back, Tim and I, we advocated, travelled widely, advocating for a recovery. I'm sort of thinking back to it, and I'm just wondering whether or not we're invited on site to view the remains, knowing that we would come back and say the things we could because Army couldn't. I don't know about that. But thankfully, the decision was made to go back and recover the site. The work of recovery went out to tender, and Louise Lowe and the Oxford Archaeology team were given that tender. So in 2009, they went back to recover the site. They opened all 8 pits, and they recovered 250 bodies from those pits. And the identification would follow from there. So what they did, the one from Madame de Massier, the year before, after they closed those pits to await that determination, she came forward and she declared that this land, it no longer belongs to me. I give it to the soldiers. A wonderful gesture from a wonderful lady. We love her. She told us lots and lots of stories. We would go and visit and be brought into the kitchenette and bring out the aperitifs and the dry biscuits and nuts and the like. And we talked about a whole lot of things. And the wonderful Madame de Massier, a very generous lady.
So while you weren't allowed on site, and then you were we'll just go back a bit, and were the French authorities called, like the police, to make sure that there was not it wasn't a murder, or what happened at that? What was that process?
Okay, the process was, once you find human remains, the difference here, it all goes back to the original question, the moral dilemma, if you will. Do you actively seek your war dead? I believe you should. We have that obligation to find and recover our war dead. When remains are found digging a pipeline or whatever, the police are called in to view the remains. They declare this is of no interest to us. It is indeed archaeological and the work can proceed. Late on the second night, they confirmed it was burial. The following morning, they call in the police. They view what they have found and they see that it is indeed archaeological and the work can proceed. So there are due processes in place, and all the way along, we follow those processes.
So you come back to Australia after the site's intact, and what happens next with the decision? What was the decision? How long did you have to wait?
There was, again, I thank the Army for having established that process, and it was their call in the end, or their observation, that we should recover this site. And thankfully and mercifully, it was made to go back and recover it. And the announcement was made officially that they would go back and recover that site. And they built, because the original site's at the bottom of a slope, prone to flooding in the winter. So they acquired some land even closer to the village on higher ground, and they built the Pheasant Wood Military Cemetery. And in 2010, they began the burial process. What had happened, once they'd gathered the remains, the call had gone out right across Australia. If you had a soldier lost at the Battle of Fromelles, come forward, offer us your family tree, nominate DNA, give us, and we'll try and match your soldier. But through the DNA, but they learned a lot from the artefacts that were recovered. They found 3 soldiers who still had the ID discs on them. The Germans had missed their discs. They found a watch with a name on it. Many poignant finds. They found a gas mask, and inside they found a train ticket, return second class, Fremantle to Perth. They found a Bible with underlined sections through it, a locket, a leather pouch in the heart of a shaped heart. Stitched inside was a note. So they're identifying bodies using artefacts, but the main way they were going to do it was by gathering DNA to match the DNA to the soldiers that were recovered.
That happens in 2010, and you were invited over to the actual ceremony of the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery at Pheasant Wood, and it was the first cemetery open since the Korean War. And so for you, what was that experience like for you, and being there, and the work that you and Robin had done, and all the team? What was it like for you being there, seeing these men be given the dignity of getting an individual burial and getting a marked grave, and for some of them who hadn't been put in a pit? Some people say, why do you bother? As you've said, Lambis, if we can recover our war dead, we should. What was that like for you?
For me, the culmination in the 8-year process came that afternoon after the service, because the last of the soldiers was brought in. What they did in January was to bury 249 soldiers. They held one soldier over for ceremonial burial for the dedication of the cemetery. And for me, as I said, the culmination came because all the way through it was a team effort, a wonderful team effort with a wonderful result. And it was a long journey, but we were finally there. And when the families got to go in to greet their soldier, to make their pilgrimage, there was some closure for the families. And as I said, it is an ongoing journey. But for me, the culmination in that process came when the families got to greet their soldiers. And the village of Fromelles has a willing and custodial role. They will love and care for the soldiers of Pheasant Wood. So it has been a long journey. There's more to be done. But like I said, a team effort with a wonderful result.
So what does Fromelles mean to you today after the work you've done there and the team, after you've I know you've walked that ground many times now, Lambis. What does it mean for you now?
Well, 166 have now been identified of the 250, and that process will continue. Royce Atkinson and his team are doing wonderful work tracing DNA right across Australia and around the world, and being in touch with the UWCA, the unit in Canberra who look for our missing if you can make a strong enough case. They're doing wonderful work together, and the process of identification will continue. Like I said, our American friends, they get it. They actively seek their war dead. If we can make a strong enough case, we will investigate, because we have more sites at Bullcore and Village Bretano, at Krithia, and the unit will look into those. But for our British friends, there's an open question there because we've tried to advocate and lobby for the British missing, because the German document, von Braun document, said dig for 400. They dig 8 pits, fill in 5. I believe that we've found the missing 150 British. There are more possibly behind the Wick Salient where they broke through. But also I believe we might have found the missing of the Battle of Aubers Ridge through trench maps and aerial photographs. Quite confident, but the British will not investigate more than 1,300 from the Battle of Aubers Ridge. But again, that moral dilemma. But I believe there is some tokenism around commemoration and remembrance. I believe that we should make every effort to find and recover our war dead. As I said, they cannot be that logistical or financial inconvenience. Find them and recover them. From the Battle of the 19th and 20th of July, we have photographs of Germans having been gathered and buried. We found that German burial site in the village of Fromelles, but that might have been recovered post-war. Someone recovered them and buried them elsewhere. We're still working on that. But again, you find and you recover your war dead. But through the efforts of our very good friends in Fromelles, the school children at the Col de Cobbers through Pierre Sellier, they have a headstone adoption program, and the children will tend the graves of their adopted soldier, the headstone. And so commemoration and remembrance is assured in youthful hands. So, like I said, the Fromelles family is broad and growing, and well, it's been a wonderful result. You get there, you get the chance to make your pilgrimage, you walk the ground. There are schools in Sydney, St Mary's Cathedral College, Steve Gary and the students there, they've done profiles and investigated the family history of soldiers, advancing a soldier's story, and they've got video profiles. The students at St Clair's through Michael Burden, they have an ongoing program as well. And they too have researched soldiers, contacted families, produced videos. So we are advancing soldiers' stories, again, in youthful hands. Commemoration and remembrance is assured.
So you were awarded an AM for your work that you did. What does that mean to you? And do you wear it proudly on the anniversary of the battle, or what does it mean to you?
It was a great honour, and I emphasised from the beginning there was always a team effort, but I was very thankful to have received that award, and I wear it once a year on the 19th of July at our Fromelles service at the shrine at the Cobbers statue. I'm very pleased to have received that award, but through the entire process, vindication was never, ever a factor. Because frankly, the work was too important and continues to be important to be that self-indulgent. There was a member of the expert panel. In the foreword of one of his books, he denigrates another writer by saying his mustard gas-filled prose at 861 pages long would give the physical impression that the war would never end with its mustard gas-filled prose. And he goes on to say, nor does it come down to the recalcitrant descendants of Pheasant Wood seeking a mystical closure. How petty, how poisonous. Again, the work is far too important to be indulgent. We continue that work, and through the auspices of the Army, the UWCA, Andrew Burney and his team, they will continue to investigate. 166 so far of the 250 identified. Identifying one was wonderful, but 166 is sensational, and hopefully that work will continue, and the work of discovery and recovery.
Absolutely. How important for you, Lambis, is VC Corner Cemetery and also the Cobbers Memorial statue at Fromelles?
VC Corner, it is a unique cemetery. 400 Australian soldiers, their bodies gathered after armistice, no headstones at all, not able to be identified. There were others gathered and identified and buried many cemeteries around Fromelles, Aubers Ridge, Ponterhem, Rue Petillon. So, but you walk that ground, the honour roll at the back, 1,299 names. There should be 1,332 because some were listed at the Village Bretono Memorial. A clerical error back in 1916, compounded in 2010. When I went in 2010, I was allowed into the cemetery. Not allowed to take any photographs of the cemetery, but I went in to find Harry Willis to say hello and had the wrong death date on Harry's headstone. Had the 21st of July. I sought the officials and I said, listen, the date on this headstone is wrong. Any Australian soldier killed on the 21st of July was back in no man's land doing the work of recovery. 30 soldiers were killed in the days after the battle doing that recovery work. They said our official records show that he was killed on the 21st. It's a bit late now, and we prefer a day's notice before we talk to you. So I was kind of used to that treatment. But I got on the phone to Tim Whitford, who got on the phone to Mike O'Brien and asked him, please tell me this is not so. And in the end, Harry's headstone and 4 others were changed in time for the service of 2010. But they made the same mistake in 2014 with Woodman. It's ongoing, but they finally made the decision. Logic has prevailed, and no more soldiers identified at Pheasant Wood will have the death date of the 21st of July. It was a clerical error, and the error has been conceded. But on the Commonwealth War Graves, again, there's a site that says there are 200 identified. What they've done is they've named 4 soldiers twice. You know, pick either the birth name or the soldier's name. But because I was contacted to say, is it 166 or 200? But the confirmation is, of course, that it is 166. But we remain ever hopeful that there will be more identifications.
So for you, Lambis, what's the proudest moment for you of the whole thing? Did you have much interaction with the families and get the personal stories of what their ancestors did?
I might be a bit dense, a bit dim, but when I get to meet family of the identified soldiers, it sinks in. But I think after the confirmation on that Wednesday morning, we came onto the site. We didn't know what had happened, but Tony Pollard made his way down the hill towards the site to continue the work, and we reached out and had a good hug. But for me, as I said, when the families got to go in and get to go in to greet their soldier, to walk the ground, to meet their soldier, that is indeed the proudest moment for me.
Absolutely, and you and the team should be very proud, Lambis. And as you've said, you knew these men. You got to speak to these men of the veterans who were there at Fromelles. And what was it for them that? What stuck out for you in their minds? Was it just an absolute slaughter, or what was their memories of the battle?
The memories of the battle, the scars of the battle, they carried it for a lifetime. Tom Brain, the last of the 60th Battalion, very feisty, wonderful man, wore his slouch hat. He remembered it vividly. He got a smack in the mouth from a shell burst. The same shell burst killed his good mate at his side. The wonderful Bill Boyce of the 58th Battalion, he worked on extending the Ronda Sap that evening, came out of the line and saw Pompey Elliott with tears in his eyes, examined his tunic and found 5 bullet holes through it and creases through it. They remember the battle vividly, and they shared it, the provenance of the battle, through the memories of these soldiers. So Charlie Henderson, he went out into no man's land to gather the wounded, try and bring them back. So their memories, the memories of General Mackay, the Australian general, he was. We were offered a truce the morning after the battle. The dead and the wounded could have been gathered, but he knocked it back. Maybe didn't want to show any weakness in the face of the enemy. But we're in our lines. We can hear the calls from no man's man, water, stretcher bearer, mother. We cannot stand down, and soldiers go out there to try and bring in their wounded mates. And as I said, as many as 30 were killed doing that work. The wonderful statue Cobbers by Peter Paulette, depicting Sergeant Simon Fraser. He and his team, they would go out into no man's land before the Sugarloaf Stadium. They brought in more than 200 wounded men. Remarkable acts of courage going out there to do that work. So none of this work would have been necessary had we agreed to the truth. The dead and the wounded could have been gathered, but that wasn't to be. So we do the advocacy, we do the work, which is ongoing, and you find and recover your war dead.
Absolutely, and it's vital work that you guys are doing, and I think all of Australia thanks you for the work that you and the team did in recovering the missing of Fromelles. I think it's so important, and I've walked that ground many times, Lambis, and I've been privileged enough to go over it and walk that ground 3 times, and what strikes me every time I'm there is it is just so flat. Like, it is just so flat and so open, and for the listeners, Lambis, you've been there many times as well. To give them an understand, it is just like it's like a football field, but it's a sown like crop, like it's farmers' fields that are sown, it's got a drainage trench through the middle. It's and it's muddy but it is such a special place, and I say it all the time, Lambis. When we can travel again, if people can go and do the pilgrimage, go to the Western Front, and go and pay your respects to the men and women who gave their lives during the Great War.
Yeah, it is evocative and very sad ground at Fromelles. It is flat, and we attacked across that. For the 15th Brigade, had to go more than 400 yards before they could get to the so-called objective. So they're cut down, and from the heights of Aubers Ridge, there's observed artillery fire coming in, and they advance through the machine gun bullets, the shrapnel, and each time I've walked that ground, we found some bone fragments. The debris of war is continually turned over, live ordnance and the like, and nothing has changed. But every battlefield is different. Every cemetery is different. You do get to make that pilgrimage. You do get to walk the ground, take it, visit the ground, walk it, and commemorate. There are some people who say by observing these World War I battles, by putting it on the curriculum, that we somehow perpetuate, even glorify war. But I would suggest that we commemorate. We honour the service and their sacrifice, not only those who went away to war and remain in foreign fields or under the sea, but also the families at home who had to endure it.
Well, how I always look at it, Lambis, is we're not glorifying war, and those cemeteries, you've been not just from Mel, you've been to Pozieres, you've been right across, you've been into Belgium, you've been right across, and so have I, and what it is to me, what strikes me every time I'm in the cemeteries is the sheer scale of the cost, and they are silent cities. These cemeteries are silent cities, and when you see Lambis, you know it too. You've seen it many times. Only son of Mr. and Mrs. Smith of Ballarat, and it's the personal stories that it's not you're not glorifying war. You're simply commemorating, and you're on a pilgrimage for the many of the families that never could get over. You're completing that pilgrimage. You are finishing something that was started when these men went and paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I think I like what you said there, where we're not glorifying war, we're simply commemorating war. That's what we're doing, and I think it's so important that people realise that, and I know you agree.
Well, we advance and we tell a soldier's story, and pilgrimage. Some have sneered at the term closure, but I think it's very important that we do these things, because and the families at home. Tim Whitford, before he came over in 2010, he went back to Alberton, went to the graves of Harry's parents and of his manor, and brought soil over to place over Harry's grave and some gum leaves. So these are all acts of remembrance, and we advance and we tell a soldier's story.
Absolutely. So you mentioned earlier, just to finish up, Lambis, you mentioned some of the other works that you're involved in and the projects. How close with Bullcore and Krithia? How confident are you with Krithia and Bullcore?
We have a very good team of network of people who do the research. With Bullcore, we have determined sites. And as I said, whenever we get anything, we send it off to the UWCA for their consideration and their evaluation. Confident that we have found some burial sites at Krithia, mainly allied. We thought we had two major burial sites, but they might have been recovered and buried at Redoubt Cemetery, but I don't know why they didn't bury them as unknown Australians rather than unknown soldiers. But we wait for our Turkish friends to allow an investigation, but we have a well up near the road, which we know has 3 soldiers of the 5th Battalion placed in them. Clearly, if unrecovered, they're still there, and we know exactly where that well is. But at Bullcore, we have burial sites behind the railway embankment. Up on the hill, Private Beaky's account of 5 shell holes with more than 200 with their discs on. At Village Breton, we have burial sites as well. And all of this, we've sent it off to Andrew Burney and the UWCA, and hopefully, post-COVID, we'll be able to get over there and investigate, see whether they're indeed still there and recover these bodies.
Absolutely, and I think Lambis, you've just said. I think all of us who have been over to the battlefields cannot wait for COVID to be able that we can travel and get back over to the battlefields. And I say it to anyone, if they can, Lambis, go over and walk these battlefields. You will not be sorry that you did. And so, just lastly, Lambis, how do you want Australians to remember Fromelles?
As I said, Robin Caulfield started this. People knew of it, but there's been a lot now written about the Battle of Fromelles, and Australians need to know that they have a friendly village over there that is now fully aware of what happened on the ground with the recovery of the Pheasant Wood site, and they meet and greet. They've done it for many, many years. Regine and Gervais, Juvenagel, Carole Danielle, Franck Fremont. We have many, many, many friends in Fromelles, and if you ever get to go over there, people who are listening, you make that pilgrimage, you walk that ground. Pierre Sellier, he meets and greets. As I said, the village have done a wonderful job, and now they have that custodial role. But you make your pilgrimage, you tell your soldier's story. And maybe the British Ministry of Defence will come around to the point where they might investigate the sites that we have determined and forward it to them. The missing British of the 19th and 20th of July, the missing British of the Battle of Aubers Ridge, the 9th of May, 1915. But again, a false economy around all of this. Yes, it is expensive. The Fromelles project, in inverted commas, has been expensive. But I mean, it's a price we should pay. You find and you recover your war dead. 2008 was a remarkable year in terms of our military heritage and our legacy. Ted Graham and his team, they found HMAS Sydney. Fantastic news. Brilliant, brilliant. And our very good friend Jim Burke and his team of Vietnam War veterans, they made a promise and they kept their promise. And their remarkable work of locating our 6 missing Vietnam War service people continued to the point where now all 6 were recovered and brought home. So there are many people doing really good work. And right across Australia now, there's yet another consideration is the unmarked graves of the soldiers, the damaged men who came home. There are more than 10,000 Australian soldiers in unmarked graves across the country. There are many people doing really good work. Gary Mitchell, Howard Rochester, Andrew Gerard and the Headstone Project team. The government keep coming back and saying there are layers of eligibility. You know, these soldiers, they come back, they go into Callan Park or Mont Park, they're in there for 5 months, 5 years, 15 years, and they die in there. Clearly it's war-related, and they're buried as paupers in unmarked graves. Surely with a good paper chase, we can find these soldiers and give them their dignity, their identity. There was a scheme whereby they removed headstones and took the plaques off and put them at the Springvale Cemetery on a Besser brick wall, hollow tinsel, and the body's in the ground with a little tin plate with an initial and a surname and a date of death printed into it. We can do better. We must do better.
I didn't know some of this. This is new to me, so I'm just shaking my head. But I agree with you. If we can do better, we should do better. And you know, you've hit the nail on the head, Lambis. Absolutely. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and telling why you got involved with the missing of Fromelles. And on behalf of all Australians, thank you for the work that you did, and thank you for not many times when you were told go away and stop making noise, and thank you for persisting, because for the families you've brought closure. For the 166 of the 250, they've now got closure of their relative, and I think on behalf of all Australians, Lambis, thank you, and thank you to the team.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review for the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. And if you feel like supporting us, you can now via our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/truebluehistory, or buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/truebluehistory, and check out our new website, truebluehistory.com, for more great content.